he's nah. I'm just kidding. I'm just a freakless Buck fan. But anyway, welcome to a new sports channel that I'm going to be creating right now. This is going to be posted on my main channel, but I'm going to be creating a solely new sports-based channel for the new era of Milwaukee Bucks basketball because I am a Milwaukee Bucks fan. And I'm going to be talking today about how I feel the Milwaukee Bucks did not fail Giannis Antetokounmpo. Um, don't know if that's a hot take. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But for what I do know, a lot of people have the tendency to say when a superstar isn't winning championships, and especially when a player of Giannis's caliber is not more successful than he's been, people are quick to say that it's an organization's fault or that it's the player's fault or a lot of things. But if you were really to consider the landscape of the league, I think the Bucks were pretty successful with the period they did have Giannis, and I can remember back in 2023 where Giannis was like, "Oh, we lost in the playoffs, but it's not a failure of a season. We're growing. We're going to be getting better again. We won our championship. We're going to keep figuring things out." And to an extent, that was the plan. Unfortunately, injuries again and again and again kept holding the Milwaukee Bucks back. Obviously, they gave up multiple future first round picks. They go get Drew Holiday. They win the championship. The team's cool. Bucks fans are happy. I'm happy. And then the year goes on. They get Damian Lillard, and I love Damian Lillard. The freak time era was cool, and all that. I would like to just real quick let you know that right now I'm recording on a very different microphone than I usually use. So if my audio is a little shitty, I do apologize. But I'm gonna do my best to try to make this during my work break as clean as possible, really get out all my thoughts and really just talk about the trade. I know a lot of people are probably making like shorts talking about the trade, being like, "Oh wow, the Bucks won the trade because of the Hall," or "Oh wow, the Heat won the trade because they got Giannis." You can look at it in multiple different ways. Um, but the way I like to look at it is the Bucks. Until we got to this point, yes, we had the going back to what I was just talking about. We had Damian Lillard. Unfortunately, Lillard wasn't healthy. He had a hip injury the first year that kind of kept him out of the playoffs. The first year we lost to the Pacers. Then the second year we lost to the Pacers in the first round. Damian Lillard had his deep vein thrombosis, or was it a vein block? It was something to do with his veins. And then he came back, and then he tore his ACL. Giannis was hurt before the playoffs. He got hurt against Boston, unironically. And then we had to try to rely on the playoffs with Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez the year before. Then the next year we trade Chris Middleton after his two cleanup ankle surgeries. He's clearly not the same player. We go get Kyle Kuzma. We had to give up a young AJ Johnson in that trade, which was a player that some people weren't really the most fond of the Bucks drafting. Speaking of the Bucks drafting, I'm going to be tangenting quite a bit. I'm sorry, I got ADHD, but I'd like to talk about how the Bucks drafting post Giannis has been a little questionable. So obviously you got Jabari Parker, second pick of the draft, a great player. Unfortunately, the injuries again happened. I mean, I guess fortunately enough, it's the reason why Giannis was focused on and more of a focal player. So I guess to an extent it worked out that we made the draft selection we did. Jabari Parker has his rookie contract. He ends up signing with the Chicago Bulls for a 2-year 40. Instead of taking 18 million a year from the Bucks, I believe it was like a 4-year 64 was the offer at the time. I could be a little wrong with the figures, or maybe it was a 5-year 70. I don't remember the exact which one of the contract offers it was, but the Bucks were committed to the idea of keeping Jabari Parker. He goes and signs with Chicago, a 2-year 40 with a team option. Then he gets traded for Otto Porter, but that's the Jabari Parker storyline. That's not the Milwaukee Bucks storyline. The Milwaukee Bucks at that point just keep drafting again and again. We tried the Thon Maker experiment with pick 10. That was our last pick 10 I can remember. I don't think well, there was also John Henson, who was a Big Ten. I liked John Henson, but that was a before Giannis thing, so that doesn't really matter. The Bucks, when it comes to drafting, haven't necessarily really had the most success. The best player I can remember us drafting in recent history was Dante DiVincenzo, but also second round Malcolm Brogdon, after his rookie contract, we ended up trading to the Pacers. He was making about $20 million a year, and we got two first round picks. I don't remember what we did with those picks or who they became, but I remember we at one point drafted DJ Wilson. We drafted Marchant Bucamp in the second round, good role player, but again, it doesn't seem like our drafting really amounted to too much. So part of me was a little wary on the idea of trading for more draft picks and getting like pick 13 when we already had pick 10. But at the same time, this is a youth movement move for sure. The Bucks had every reason to do what they've done. When Damian Lillard went down, the year prior, the Bucks said, "Hey, we have Giannis for another year and then a player option the following year. This is the last chance we have, especially with Jason Tatum presumably not playing the year, and then obviously he played in the latter half of the year, and then Tyrese Halliburton not being around. The Pacers definitely fell off. The Celtics, to an extent, fell off. Yes, they were a good team in the playoffs, and I'm not saying that they were bad to any extent, but you could tell without Tatum in the playoffs how they were struggling and how maybe they weren't really this that much better team that some people thought they could have been. And now next year, I think the Celtics are perfectly fine keeping Jalen Brown, whether they trade him or not. I think the Celtics are still a very great team in the East. But that's what fueled the Bucks' philosophy was the thought that the Celtics weren't going to be as dominant, the Pacers weren't going to be as dominant, the Cavs kept being a good team that weren't successful. Like that was the time to buy in. They go get Miles Turner, they get KPJ, and KPJ was a potential most improved caliber player. So was Ryan Rollins, Torian Prince off the bench. When the year first started, the Bucks were so successful with like the little things, one of the best three-point shooting teams, a good defensive team to start the year, and then unfortunately Giannis only plays 36 games this year. KPJ only played 40. Um, Torian Prince, who was one of our best bench players, got hurt constantly. For whatever reason, Doc Rivers' scheme kept scheming AJ Green to the four, and AJ Green was just a great perimeter defender, but a defensive liability against taller guys. So our defense just looked really choppy at times. I remember watching a game with Miles Turner, thinking, Giannis is hurt, KPJ's hurt. Miles Turner now has the best opportunity to try to really show why we paid him so much money, and we were playing the Celtics. We inevitably won that game. That first game we played Boston. Bobby Portis was a huge part of that. And so was Kyle Kuzma. He had 30 points against Jalen Brown. That was the game he was going at Jalen Brown the entire game. Um, which I like Kyle Kuzma. I wouldn't even be against us re-signing Kyle Kuzma. I mean, I know he's making $20 million this year and he's turning 30. Oh, he is 30. But with his next option on his contract, I wouldn't be against the idea of giving him an extension where he makes like 10 to 15 a year and stays in Milwaukee. I'd be okay with that. He does have some championship experience. He'd be a good vet to keep. He's versatile enough to defend multiple positions. I like him. Yes, he's not the best player ever. And in a Taylor Jenkins system where you need a guy to just be a versatile defender and shoot threes and maybe gets to the basket at times, a guy like Kyle Kuzma's not bad to have. But the whole point of that whole speech basically was saying that, wait, what? Where's I going with that? We faced Boston. We beat Boston. You know what, Loki? I kind of forgot what the whole point of that spiel was. But going back to what I have on the screen right here, which I haven't even addressed, the actual trade for Giannis. So there was the Celtics and the Heat were the two finalist runners, you could call them. And trading Giannis to the West would have been dumb for any team to really buy all in on. The only team that I think in the West that maybe would have, well, maybe two. The Thunder and the Spurs were really the only two teams in the West that I think really had the packages to buy in on. I don't think the Timberwolves had. They didn't have the draft capital. They didn't really have the pieces to make a good Giannis package, in my opinion. And the Timberwolves need help, but they just didn't have the pieces for it. The Nuggets, I really don't know how you were going to ever convince that idea to make sense. So the Spurs, however, I think they could have offered like, and again, I'm not saying they actually offered this, but from like my mindset perspective, the Spurs could have offered De'Aaron Fox's 40 million, 40 to 50ish million, whatever it's about to be, and maybe throw in like a filler contract, like a Keldon Johnson or something, and then maybe some of their future 2030 picks, because Dylan Harper could have been a starter, Stephon Castle could have been a starter, Devin Vassell could have been your three, Giannis could have been your four, and Wemby could have been your five. Wemby could still be this, elite shot blocker, but he's such a great floor spacer on offense. He can shoot from almost anywhere. He's taller to shoot over anybody. Giannis could always be there to crash the glass. And the only reason why I can understand why the Spurs maybe wouldn't have wanted to trade for Giannis is, do you really want to take in somebody who's going to take away from Wemby's touches when he's as dominant as he is? Sure, you could have built a quote-unquote super team, but I mean, I think we've seen what Giannis does when he's next to a guy who, Damian Lillard, for an example, who was a primary ball handler. He's like, Dame, this is your team now too, But it really was a lot of Giannis still just needing the ball in his hands to do things. Giannis wasn't really the best. Hey, let's run pick and roll. You're an elite point guard. Let's do this type of thing. And if you try to take away from Wemby, then maybe the Spurs would have not liked that idea. So I can understand why the Spurs didn't put together a more intense package to try to get Giannis. And then same thing with the Thunder. They're young. Chet's young. J-Dub's young. Shea's young enough. There's no reason for them to get older and potentially an injury-prone player. The Heat, on the other hand, had every reason to seek another superstar because they were a more bottom-tier playoff team this year. And with Tyler Hero also not being especially healthy all year, um, and with Norman Powell getting older, with Andrew Wiggins being in his 30s, it's not to me that big of a problem because they're in their like earlier 30s. But and same thing with Giannis, he's in his earlier 30s. But if you consider the longevity of your roster with Bam already being 28, um, you really got to think with the team they're trying to put together. It's definitely cool. It's interesting. I just don't know. I don't think that team beats the Knicks, unfortunately. But we'll see. We will see. Like Bobby Portis is in his 30s. I love Bobby Portis as a Bucks fan. It does hurt to lose Bobby Portis, but I mean, I can understand the idea of okay, we need to make some room on the roster, especially if we're taking in four new players plus a pick 13. So we have our own pick 10. We're getting pick 13 from Miami this year, so that's already two players to make space for. We're getting J.K. to be a guard. We're getting Jaime Jaquez, we're getting Khalil Ware, and we're getting Tyler Hero. That's six players to make space for. So, understandably, I understand why BP had to be part of the trade. It is what it is. Not to mention the fact that we get the best of. So, obviously, this 2K doesn't really like allow you to like properly show things because the Stepien rules a thing. So that pick would have been in here. We get an unprotected pick in 2031 and 2023. Sorry, 2033. We get an unprotected pick in 2031 and 2033, as well as a second round pick, and then the best of picks in 2030. We get pick 13, which is good, and then we get these young players. All these young guys. This brother just turned 20. Jaime Jaquez is only like 25. Khalil Ware just is like 21 years old or 22. I think he's 22. Yeah, he'd be 22 by now. And then Tyler Hero is, I think by this point he's going to be 27. Uh, as we get into next year's season. Yes, Tyler Hero will need extension. He is from the Milwaukee area. I love the running joke of bringing a hometown hero, unironically because his name's Tyler Hero, to Milwaukee. I love that idea. I thought that was kind of cool and funny. But there's also so much time for this trade to change. So if we think back to like the year prior where Kevin Durant got traded to like the Suns, there was it started off as like a one for one trade between the Nets and the Suns, and it became like a 7 team trade where all these other contracts got moved and whatnot before the season actually started. And there still is room for that. As much as I like the guys that we got and the picks we got, there's still a world where we reroute players, reroute contracts, reroute picks. Like I could understand if the Bucks wanted to say, hey, maybe the $30 million of Miles Turner at the age of 30, Miles Turner's still a good enough defender and a good enough spread player for him to go to a win now team and win. The problem is he's making $27 million. So there's a world to see if anything's going to happen with that. The Kyle Kuzma money doesn't bother me because again, it's only one more year we have to pay him, and then if we decide to extend him, I don't see Milwaukee offering him $20 million a year at the age of 30. So we'll see what happens. But you can tell like the potentialness to move off this contract could be there. For a great example would be the Brooklyn Nets and the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves just unloaded Julius Randle to the Brooklyn Nets essentially for a second round pick, so they could have the money to re-sign Io DeSumo, and then they got this guy from the Bulls, Muhammad. What was his name again? I'm sorry. Muhammado guy who they're gonna waive. They're gonna waive him, but basically just to get off that Julius Randle contract, they bit and just took a second round pick, and then the Nets gave up Nick Claxton, and the Nets also gained a first round pick in that trade. So the Nets made some very interesting moves here. Nets did make some interesting moves here. Like I could see why you would want to do this because you take on the contracts for a few years. You have to hit the base salary floor. You have to pay players anyway. Julius Randle's still good enough where when you don't have your own first round pick, you don't really want to just hand that good pick over to another team. So this way you can still do something nice for your fans, do something kind of fun, but not really have to, give up a lot of assets. They didn't give up a lot to get Julius Randle. They just got a good player they can use for now, and then when he leaves, they don't have to really care. They gave up a second round pick. It's not like the NFL where a second round pick is like a go-to starter. So, but anyway, back to talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. Where's my team? Oh, here we go. So what I'm thinking is the future of the Bucks is going to be a little interesting because we haven't done a rebuild for a while. I've been a Bucks fan since back when we had Michael Redd, where our team was Michael Redd, Andrew Bogut. It was a very different type of Bucks team. You know, we were buying in on just being a good enough to be playoff team quite constantly, never really being good enough to beat a lot of the better teams. And then we went through our rebuild. Obviously, it takes quite some time to rebuild correctly. There's a reason why losing Giannis hurts when you're a Bucks fan. It's not just because he's so talented. It's also because you have to think that he won the Bucks a championship for the first time in 50 years, and in my lifetime, like the whole Kareem Milwaukee Bucks stuff, is cool and all, but I wasn't born. I wasn't alive till 2000, so my love as a sports fan is a little bit different. So I'm not, because that was my first time ever seeing my team win a championship, and that's the first one I've ever seen in my existence. And I've seen this team be competitive many years, or at least try. And that brings me back to the whole point of this entire conversation is I don't believe the Milwaukee Bucks failed Giannis. I don't believe it. They gave up a lot of their future to get Drew Holiday to win a championship. They go get him Damian Lillard. They constantly waived good young players that they signed in the second round, who they gave multiple year deals to. Took the dead money just to bring in Thanasis, just to bring in Alex Antetokounmpo. They've done so much for Giannis, in my opinion. They've done a lot, and I can understand the whole hey, maybe not winning enough and missing the playoffs. Giannis only played 36 games. I would have to imagine if Giannis played 60 games and if Kevin Porter Jr. didn't get hurt, and maybe if Doc Rivers ran a few better rotations, I genuinely think this team would have been like a mid to late playoff team. Like we would have been, in my opinion, we would have been Miami. We would have been that good. Now, that doesn't mean we were winning a championship. That doesn't mean Giannis still probably wasn't going to want out. And I truly believe Giannis doesn't hate the city of Milwaukee at all. I think he just knows that the relationship with the organization has gone a different direction because, yeah, they signed Taylor Jenkins supposedly without his say in things, and quite frankly, sometimes an organization has to do what's best for them. You can't always cater to your best player. And if I had to think of a great example, it's a football example. It's the Houston Texans and Deshaun Watson. It's also the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. It's these teams that traded quarterbacks for a haul of young assets because those guys were upset that they weren't involved enough in decision making. And quite honestly, at the time, yes, Russell Wilson was an MVP, like former MVP. Deshaun Watson was this great elite young quarterback who had so much potential, like guys who clearly were valuable and obviously maybe not the same level of talent in their respective sport, but if you consider someone like Giannis, who at one point was considered a top three basketball player in the entire world, then yes, the Bucks had every reason to get as much assets for him. Well, they can now, and going back and looking at the potential trade offers, there was the Celtics, and then there was the Heat. The Heat offered, as we just mentioned, a haul of young players and draft picks and future swaps. Things that when the Milwaukee Bucks actually have the rights to their own picks, they'll have so much more flexibility because in 2030 you get the better of the pick. In 2031, from 2031 to 2033, they'll have their own picks and the Heat picks. So by then, Giannis is late 30s to damn near 40 by that time. The idea of him being a valuable asset to the Heat is likely not going to be a thing. So the Bucks will have all the leeway in the world to say, "Hey, do we want to move up in the draft? Are we going to draft two good players because the Heat were bad and we were bad? Are we going to be competitive at that point? Are we going to start offering our Bucks picks to get other good players and then keep the Miami picks and then get other good young players to rebuild with?" Who really knows what the future looks like at that time? So I think the Bucks did the right move trading Giannis now to Miami. Supposedly, the Celtics offered Jalen Brown and two first round picks, and quite frankly, first round picks from the Celtics are not meaningful to me. Like, I think of it like I think of it like the Desmond Bain trade for the Grizzlies. Like, yes, you got 5 first round picks from the Magic or 4 first round picks, whatever. But when the Magic are doing a trade to get a guy like Desmond Bain and they're going to be competitive, and those picks are like supposedly going to be in the 20s. Now, granted, the Magic underperformed, but in a world where the Magic were going to be this great competitive team because they made a trade like that, those picks aren't expected to be good. And quite frankly, we're in the same situation. I don't believe we're in the same boat really to. I don't believe we were in the same boat to go get Jaylen Brown because Jaylen Brown was in the MVP voting. Jaylen Brown is a great player. I love Jaylen Brown, but I can't be convinced Jaylen Brown was going to come to Milwaukee, help us win, and want to stay in Milwaukee. Jaylen Brown's also 28 years old, going on 29. By the time we become good again with Jaylen Brown, we could be in the same situation where Jaylen Brown might not want to stay in Milwaukee, or maybe he might want to go somewhere else, and then that would be putting us in the same situation where we have to presume we can find a trade package good enough to move Jaylen Brown, and presumably the picks we get have to be worthwhile if we're giving up Giannis. So it just wasn't enough, in my opinion. It was not enough of a risk to take. At this point, you get young players, and even if hypothetically, if any of these young players don't pan out, they're young. There's always going to be the option to move them next year or trade for something else, or hey, maybe we package a few of these young guys and pick 13, and maybe we still go get another good quality player to fill in our roster. Like there's flexibility with a trade like this. You got the contract of Miles Turner. You got the contract of Tyler Hero. If for some reason a trade for another player became possible that you wanted to try, we have options. So I'm not against this idea of the Bucks retooling for the future. In fact, I would consider it the best of options, as opposed for this idea of trying to stay competitive. And as a Bucks fan, I want to see my team be competitive, but I also think a lot of the ways the teams have been retooling to be good. And if we're going to look at the West for an example, the Thunder, the Spurs, these are teams that were bad, drafted well, traded at the right time, got good additional assets, and started winning. Then you got a team like the Knicks, who they signed Jalen Brunson. They trade for Mikal Bridges. They trade for OG Anunoby. They trade for Karl Anthony Towns. You need assets to do that. After losing so many assets trying to make this team win, specifically to build around Giannis, there wasn't much flexibility. And that's why I'm pro trade for flexible assets. Trading for Jaylen Brown is not trading for a flexible asset. That's trading for a one-for-one replacement. There's no flexibility there. And I'd rather the assured haul now for Miami than the potential haul for Jaylen Brown. That's the way I like to think about it. There's also a point that we haven't even addressed yet, but Milwaukee with these assets could go a lot of different directions. Milwaukee can offer, and again, I like Tyler Hero. I'm not saying I want to reroute Tyler Hero, but hypothetically speaking, Tyler Hero is still a good enough asset to a team that wants to compete where we could still get a haul from them. A team like Detroit was brought up for an example. They could offer Karis LeVert, Beef Stew, and future, let's say, 2 or 3 future first round picks. Hypothetically speaking, that's not an assured trade, but that's like an idea of the type of thing they could offer. And we could get off the Tyler Hero contract. We could get Karis LeVert, who could just be a good bench wing. Um, and we could get Beef Stew, who could be a backup 4 behind Kuzma, because we have Khalil Ware and Miles Turner, so we don't need a 5. And we can get future draft picks as well to add to our repertoire of assets. That's a possibility. There's also maybe a team like Brooklyn. Maybe Brooklyn would be willing to trade pick 6 to us for like that pick 13 in Tyler Hero, and maybe give us like a future first round pick from them or the Rockets or something. Like there's a lot of different ways we can wiggle room in trades here still with the assets we have. Um, and I think especially that lateral trade option with all the other teams, like this still could become like a 4 or 5 team trade where like some of the guys we have get rerouted for other picks, or where we just trade for other players because we still have the contract of Kuzma, we still have the contract of Miles Turner, um, but then we still have like some key players on our team we clearly want to build around, like Ryan Rollins. He's only 24 years old. He's only going to be making 4 million next year. He will decline his player option the following year, more than likely. So, and we're going to have to be considering the idea of paying him to be our future guard. We like Ryan Rollins. We have no reason to get rid of Ryan Rollins. Kuzma will be a good vet, but with the whole young game we're playing, he might be an odd man out the following year if they don't decide to resign him, which that would be a then type of problem. Miles Turner makes 27 mil. Who knows if he's a foreseeable future piece or not? I like Miles Turner, but if he gets traded because of his money, I understand. Usman Zhang, super young, good, well-rounded player. We could find ourselves paying him $8 to $12 million a year this offseason to get him to stay for multiple years with how young he is. And if we wanted to move him later, that's an option. AJ Green signed his extension. He will be making $10 million a year. Great piece off the bench. He's a good age. By the time his contract ends, he's 30. Maybe he gets a little extension. Maybe he doesn't. Torian Prince is probably not going to be here. Gary Trent's probably not going to be here. Jericho Sims has a player option. He's probably going to decline. Pete Nance is probably not going to be here. Gary Harris has just accepted his player option in real life, so he will be here. Thanasis will be a free agent, and we'll probably see him on Miami soon. Bouncy dual finisher. Huh. Bouncy dual finisher. Cool name. But Cormac Ryan, for the little time he played here, was cool. Who knows what we'll do with him? Alex Antetokounmpo, who knows if a team will take a risk on him or not. So looking at our team, and then you add all those players we just got from Miami. Today is the NBA draft. Today is the day where we have pick 10 and pick 13. A lot of the mock drafts are suggesting we take a guy like Braden Burries from Arizona. We got another potential ball handler slash defensive type guard who could play behind Tyler Hero. That's not a terrible idea. He could also become a future starter if we look to move Tyler Hero. So that's not terrible. There's also the idea that we take a guy like Nate Ament, who could just be a full-time replacement for Kyle Kuzma the following year. That's also an option. We could also just look to moves picks 10 and 13 for future picks, and then have the young guys we have now be more of the focus. So, a lot of options there. Oh, let me check this. I got a text. Blah, 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 blah. Hmm. All right. Well, I'll respond to that text later. Um. But anywho, any which way. Sorry, my brain just went in a direction I wasn't even expecting. But anyway, I love these like actual conversations about the basketball as opposed to just like quick shorts because like I love thinking of like all the potential things that could happen. Because prior to this actual Giannis trade happening, I was convinced this was going to be a 4 or 5 team trade. I was convinced the Bucks were going to look to throw in more contracts. I was convinced the Heat were going to try to throw in Nikola Jovic to have another team take on some money so they could have some flexibility in free agency. Because with Norman Powell, um, yeah, because with Norman Powell's money being potentially something lingering for them to pay Andrew Wiggins, and now you add on the Giannis contract, the Bam contract. They gave Bam 50 plus million, and now you're gonna have to make sure Giannis isn't extendable till I believe October 14th or something like that. It won't be until October until the Miami Heat give him this huge, huge, huge contract. So really, all Giannis has to do is play a month and a half of healthy basketball with Miami. He gets a fat supermax, and then yeah, then he just has to try to stay healthy so the team can be competitive. I personally am not a huge Miami Heat fan. I've disliked them ever since the bubble. Quick context there. The only two basketball teams I give a crap about are the Milwaukee Bucks and the Indiana Pacers. Pacers because of my father, and the Bucks because I'm a Bucks fan. And in that year, Bubble God T.J. Warren lost to the Miami Heat. They then beat my Milwaukee Bucks, and I was very disappointed. And I live in Massachusetts, so my hometown team is technically the Boston Celtics. I'm not a huge fan of them, but but yeah, I was kind of hoping they'd beat Miami and kind of like redemption arc me, and then they didn't, and then Miami went all the way to the finals just to lose. So I was happy Miami lost, but ever since then I've been kind of against the Miami Heat and disliked them. So now seeing my favorite player of all time in a Miami Heat jersey, for me it was a lose-lose. It was either my favorite player of all time goes to the team that I dislike, aka the Miami Heat, or they go to my hometown team, which is also a team that I tend to not be very fond of. So overall, this entire Giannis saga was a complex of him going to teams that were going to disappoint me. But then again, haul wise, the Celtics and the Heat really did have the best to offer. The Timberwolves were never going to be able to give me something I want. The Nuggets weren't going to make any sense. The Spurs and Thunder, although potentially making sense to a degree, just weren't going to pony over the assets. I'm really surprised the Thunder haven't ponied over the assets. With all the draft picks they have, I'm really shocked that they haven't offered the contract of maybe like Alex Caruso or the player option of Lou Dort. That's $35 million right there between those two players. I'm surprised they don't offer those two players and a handful of picks to try to go get some good veteran who makes around 30 plus mil or something. But and maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who really knows? They also have a handful of picks in this year's draft, which is why they traded Aaron Wiggins for 2 seconds. It's not because they needed more second round picks, it's because they need to make space on their roster. They are in line to draft guys. I believe they have picks 12 and 17, I believe. So they could draft someone like Yaxel Lendenberg, or they could also draft. They could draft another big. Instead of paying Isaiah Hartenstein, they could draft someone like Ademara or maybe Henry Vassar. They could draft that big man who's really good at shooting. Kind of reminds me of slower Larry Markkinen, or maybe like a less aggressive rebounding Frank Kaminsky. I don't know. That's just the guys that came to my head when I thought of him. Either which way, um, still not Bucks related, but I like my team. And I like the fact that we're trying to rebuild, and I like the fact that we're trying to be smart because Jimmy Haslam, the I forget if he's the majority owner or if he's just an owner who's more vocal. But regardless, Jimmy Haslam, who's the same guy who owns the Cleveland Browns, was like, I guess it's finally time to trade Myles Garrett. Why? Not because of the picks and draft picks, but because Jared Verse was in the trade. Okay. So now with Giannis, there was this thought that maybe we were going to take the Celtics trade. Maybe Jaylen Brown was our Jared Verse to our Myles Garrett. Maybe Jaylen Brown to Giannis was that same correlation. And it's a little bit different, though, because Jared Verse is stupidly young on a rookie contract. And I guess more or less that's kind of what the Heat had to offer. The draft picks were overwhelmingly more valuable. The Tyler Hero is still young enough where you can say, okay, he's a good piece to get into a trade. You're getting 3 20-year-olds. It just makes more sense. There's no telling that the Jaylen Brown thing was going to work out. Even if we were like a fringe playoff team with Jaylen Brown, Ryan Rollins, Kuzma, Miles Turner. Presumably in that trade we wouldn't have had to do Bobby Portis, so we would have had Bobby Portis still. AJ Green off the bench. And then whoever we get at pick 10. It's cool. It really is, but it just wouldn't have made a lot of sense. So, I think we did good. But again, the whole overall point to this was I can't say the Bucks failed Giannis because Giannis wanted to get traded. He got his trade he allegedly wanted, and Miami is still a competitive enough team where he could be a playoff contender. Even if the fit with him and Bam could be considered awkward, I don't think it would be that awkward. I think Bam's a good enough floor spacing shooter where you could make it work. I know Bam's not a lights out shooter per se, but I think next to Giannis, Bam can get more open shots. I don't think Bam really needs the ball in his hands to just fight in the midi like he did for half the year. I think Bam's a good enough scorer at getting to the basket. He's a good enough 3 point shooter that next to Giannis things could work out. He's also a good defender, so the little split you have between Bam and Giannis playing defense, but also being able to get to the basket, but also being able to be shooting. I mean, well, Giannis is obviously not a 3 point shooter, but Giannis can. We know Giannis can hit his middies pretty convincingly. He's tall enough to shoot over most people. He's a good enough shooter. I remember when he hit the game winner on the Pacers. Also years ago, that game winner against the Knicks. He's hit some pretty clutch middies in his career. He's not just great at getting to the basket. He's still a great on-ball defender. The biggest concern with this trade, and I remember a lot of other people who talked about this trade because the trade went down at midnight last night, so there's been time for people to give their takes on what they think of the trade. Some people are concerned with Giannis's health, and quite frankly, that's what makes this trade so interesting. Is the fact that the Miami Heat are so infatuated with this player's skill that his health didn't even really stop the idea of them potentially gutting their future for a guy who only played 36 games in a season. If you don't remember, there was a universally amazing big man who was essentially good at everything and just not that great of a three-point shooter, who was also a really, really, really good rebounder, who was also a really, really good playmaker to an extent, and who was also really good at scoring at the basket, who was one of the best players in the NBA, and who had guard ability, and that man was Anthony Davis. So, obviously, Giannis at his peak was better than Anthony Davis, but the point we're trying to make here is that damn, why does my train of thought keep dying on me? Mm-mm. Also, people in this office are very loud. So, let me try this again. Okay. So, yeah, you knew the value of Anthony Davis when he got traded, but when Anthony Davis got injured, that's where I was going with this. When Anthony Davis got injured, his injuries just kept coming back. They kept coming back. He would have a healthy-ish season, he'd get injured again. He'd have a healthy-ish season, he'd get injured again. Can I see games played to make this point? Yeah, well, eh, there you go. So, obviously, that's a simulated game. That doesn't matter. But check it out here. See, this is kind of like with Giannis. Plays 60-plus games, plays 70. Giannis, I believe, has played up an 80 or full healthy season before. 36 games with injuries, right? 40 games, 56 games. Has a healthy-ish season, right? Then 50 games again. So that healthy-ish season will come, but there's also those years in between where he's playing sub 60 games, which would be his qualifier to really help with his accolades, but also playing 60 plus games is needed for your best player if you're giving up the haul you're giving up. You need to make sure he's going to be healthy enough to play games. The Bucks have been very good about sitting Giannis to make sure that he was healthy enough if they were going to keep him and whatnot, but there's no guarantee that he stays healthy, especially with his aggressive play style. His play style's very go downhill, be aggressive, take contact, and for a guy who just came off 4 injuries in the same year, that is a very high risk to take. Very, very high risk. So all I'm saying is I'd be pretty confident with the return the Bucks got because the Bucks got a haul that is very future oriented, and I just don't believe, even if we didn't trade Giannis, I just can't bank on his health right now. When you come off that many injuries in one season, there's a lot of speculation that maybe some of his injuries were, maybe a little overplayed. Maybe they felt the need to sit him more so they could get a draft pick, whatever. There was a lot of that type of stuff, but quite honestly, I wouldn't buy into that. Maybe near the end of the year, I would have bought into that a little bit, but not in the beginning of the year. I would have ever bought into that idea because Giannis's supposed deadline was like, okay, check in the first 25 games of the season, and if the team's doing good, I'm convinced we're competitive. If we're not, then maybe I need to leave. That was his supposed conversation he had with Milwaukee. He wanted to go to. There was a thought that he wanted to go to the Knicks last year, and the Knicks ended up winning the championship. So, clearly Giannis knows what he wants. He wants to win, and the Bucks aren't winning. So they had every reason to trade him, but I still can't say the Bucks failed him because they bought in to win him his first championship. They were consistently competitive. They've given him the resume to be the best player in Milwaukee Bucks history. He's still an MVP. He's still all these other things. And yeah, unfortunately, the players that the Bucks picked to put around him constantly were either injured or not enough, and that's where the Bucks get the blame for not being good enough to win and not win Giannis more championships. But at the same time, Giannis himself not being healthy was a big reason why the Bucks couldn't be competitive this year, and you can't really blame Milwaukee for trying to buy in on young talent now to make sure that next year they had pieces to try to be competitive again if they were going to run it back with Giannis. You know, guys like Usman Jang, who were very well rounded, guys like Ryan Rollins, who got the keys to really try to develop, guys like Kevin Porter Jr., who were aggressive scorers, who were needed, AJ Green and his efficiency was needed. These things were needed to stay competitive. And we won 32 games. We won 32 games, and Giannis only played 36 games. We did not win every game that Giannis played, obviously, but put that into consideration, the fact that Giannis played less than half a season and this team was like 8 games away from being in a play-in. With Giannis being healthy, playing a 60-game season, we were potentially better than Miami. We were potentially better than the Hornets. We were potentially better than this team. Oh, sorry, maybe more likely better than the Magic. The Magic beat the Hornets. The Magic got the play-in spot. Quite frankly, the Hornets were a way more fun team to watch, and the Hornets were playing way better basketball. But then again, the Hornets were lacking the star power. You know, you had the efficiency of Con Knipple. You had the healthy and good basketball abilities of LaMelo Ball. You had Miles Bridges being an underrated player. You had Ryan Kalkenbrenner being an okay center. Like you had a team that was good. You had a team that was fun. But overall, yes, the Magic were better. The Heat were better. They're the teams that won, and they're the teams that got in because of the play-in. Milwaukee could have been one of those teams had Giannis been healthy for the year. If KPJ had been healthy for the year, we could have been there. If Bobby Portis doesn't get suspended 25 games because of, I don't remember, was it PEDs? And it was something. Was it marijuana? I don't remember. All of these things impact our season. We had to play Pete Nance more. We had to play Cormac Ryan more. We had to put AJ Green extended to the 4 at times, and he was just getting beaten at the basket because he's only 6'4". You know, that small ball lineup doesn't work when you have Miles Turner at the 5. You need a more aggressive guy like Giannis at the 4 to make up for the fact that Miles Turner's not going in for every rebound. He's protecting the paint and he's floor spreading. And the type of lineups we had to run because of availability was the reason we weren't more competitive. And I'd like to think that the trade we made now gives us flexibility. We have a 7-footer again, a true 7-foot center who's just going to get boards. He's going to be a better Jericho Sims who can shoot the ball better. Because I liked Jericho Sims because Jericho Sims was superly aggressive. He set good screens and he was incredibly efficient at the basket. Because what did he do? He got putbacks, he got rebounds, and he was just a good standard big. He wasn't the best big on the team, of course not. But we can build around a guy like Kalel Ware. Jaime Jaquez is a good wing. Not, he's kind of like a Kyle Kuzma in a way. He's a smaller Kyle Kuzma. You know, he's a little bit good at everything, and he's a young guy we can use to develop. He probably won't cost us an arm and a leg to keep on the team. That's wonderful. We have this young 20-year-old guard who, if things for some reason don't work out with Tyler Hero or Ryan Rollins, hey, guess what? We have another guard we can run things with and give stuff a try with. Not to mention the fact that we have picks 10 and 13, which maybe we draft another guard. Maybe we reroute some of the players we got for picks, and then we find more fillers for our team. One way or another, the team's going to be put together with these players. So, Milwaukee did a fine job, in my opinion. Some people will say we win the trade, some people will say we lose the trade. At this point, it's way too early to say, especially when you have draft picks in 2033 and 2030 and 2031. Like, that is a combination of 5 to 7 years removed from now. There's just no reason to really try to gauge that value. It's better to just say, hey, if you're a Bucks fan, you're ready for this team to do their rebuild. You're ready for this team to essentially try something new. Taylor Jenkins is going to bring a whole different philosophy than Doc Rivers. We won our championship with Budenholzer. We had Adrian Griffin for a little bit. Guys like Scott Brooks were not a fan of him. Some people just didn't like Adrian Griffin. We were winning games with him, but there was a lot of problems. Adrian Griffin goes. We get Doc Rivers. A questionable decision in a lot of different ways because, yes, Doc Rivers has a regimen that's a little bit more strict, and sometimes it works with players. In this case, it really didn't. You know, I was always questioning why is Andre Jackson Jr. not getting more playing time. He's an athletic 3 and D guard who can play make decently. Yes, he's inefficient at times, but that's how you learn. You play him, and for whatever reason, Doc Rivers never gave him time of day. He didn't develop, and now we have him for 1 more year, and we're probably not going to get to keep him. So Doc Rivers leaving was a good thing. We get Taylor Jenkins. Taylor Jenkins seems like a player's coach. It seems like the players on the Grizzlies liked him. It seems like, the Grizzlies had a game this year where they broke their franchise history with most threes scored in a game. And if you know Milwaukee this year, Milwaukee was a good 3-point shooting team. Ryan Rollins is going to shoot that three ball a lot. AJ Green's going to shoot that three ball a lot. Kuzma's not afraid to chuck those threes. Miles Turner's not afraid to chuck those threes. Tyler Hero definitely will not be afraid to chuck those threes. And depending on who we draft with 10 or 13, we'll probably get another straight shooter. So I would have to say that this team is not doing bad at trying to rebuild, especially with the new draft odds. We don't have control of our own picks, but honestly, us being a bottom feeding team would mean that our picks would be less valuable. So quite frankly, us rebuilding right now is perfectly fine. It doesn't hurt us nearly as bad, and the teams that have the rights to our picks, who really cares what they get? Because right now we have assets to go get other picks. We have assets to move up in the draft. We have 10 and 13. If we really, really, really wanted to, we could call Sacramento. We could call Brooklyn. We could call Atlanta. We could try to move up in the draft if we really find it necessary. I don't find it necessary, but if it was necessary, the option's there. I don't think the Mavs are going to take Nate Ament. I think he falls to Miami at 10. I think he falls to Milwaukee at 10, and then we get that athletic wing to be the backup four behind Kuzma to be our future four at some point, and then pick 13. Maybe we draft a guard. Maybe we draft a big. That part I don't know. Pick 13 is kind of up in the air, or we draft the as I mentioned earlier, Braden Burries out of Arizona. We get that secondary ball handler, put him behind Tyler Hero, let AJ Green flex to a backup three, and then we to replace the Torian Prince time, and then maybe at pick 13 we just look to get the next best forward we can to back up a combination of sometimes Jaime Jaquez and sometimes Kuzma. I mean, that's kind of where my head's at the moment. Random emails, random texts, random whatever. The Spurs want Jaylen Brown. That's an interesting notification. Oh, that's cool. The Spurs want Jaylen Brown. Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Brown would be a good fit on the Spurs. That is the type of move that would put them over the top. How do they get Jaylen Brown? How do you convince the Celtics to give the Spurs Jaylen Brown? That's in my head what I'm thinking. Because contractually, it's the same thing I thought with Giannis. It's like, okay, it's probably De'Aaron Fox. And are you. Why would Boston want to give up Jaylen Brown for De'Aaron Fox, though? They have really no reason to want to do that, apart from the idea of Jaylen Brown just demanding a trade. But even if Jaylen Brown did demand a trade, the Celtics don't have any real reason to say, well, I guess we have to now trade you. They can just be like, hey, buddy, you're making 50 to 60 mil, and you're on a potential championship roster team. You have no reason to leave, and quite frankly, he doesn't. The Celtics, with a healthy Jason Tatum next year, are still a championship contender, nonetheless. Whether it's the Knicks, whether it's the Heat, whether it's the Cavs, I see the Heat in the Cavs situation. I see the Heat as that team that has the players to win and just can't get the job done. That's what I see this trade. That's why I'm not even too concerned about the Heat having Giannis. I'm not convinced it works out. I'm convinced Giannis has a semi-healthy year next year where he starts off the first 2 months healthy. He signs his massive contract extension. He plays another few months. He sits out a few times for like injury management or whatever. And then come time playoffs, he's burnt out and the Heat don't win. So overall, I don't blame the Bucks. The Bucks made the right decision because the trade deadline last year, I was semi in favor of trading Giannis to the Warriors. The reason why I was semi in favor of that was because in my mind, I'm like, okay, we'll take a young Jonathan Kuminga. We'll take what was the option? It was like young Jonathan Kuminga, young Pod, and some contract filler. I think it was Draymond Green, and then we got like essentially like 6 first round picks. Like we got 4 unprotected first round picks and then like 2 swaps, and it was all like going to be post Steph Curry picks. And I wasn't convinced the Warriors were going to do the best job teaming up Giannis with a co-star, because clearly the Bucks struggled to team up Giannis with a co-star for a reason, because they were always already constantly playing other players to play with him, and then they always had to make trades to go get co-stars. I feel like the Warriors would have found themselves in the same struggle, not to mention the fact the Warriors would have had to get past the Spurs, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards. Like, there would have been too many barriers, in my opinion, for that team to be successful. So I think all things considered, I think Milwaukee did the best thing. Sure, you kept Giannis in the East, but at the same time, whether the Heat make it to the finals or not, beating the Spurs is no easy competition. Beating the Knicks is no easy competition. Beating the Thunder in the finals wouldn't be no easy competition. For some reason, if the Nuggets make a big three again, if the Nuggets make a trade and have Jamal Murray, Jokic, and some other big three player, the Nuggets alone already are still a competitive team with Jokic and Murray. Timberwolves, I'm not too convinced the Timberwolves find their way to the finals next year. Not because, like, I believe in Anthony Edwards. I believe Anthony Edwards can will that team, and I believe Jaden McDaniels is a great piece. Ayo Dosunmu is a good piece. I just, even with Dante DiVincenzo being injured, if he was healthy, that still would have been more helpful. Rudy Gobert is still that good shot blocking center that team needs, who can get the rebounds and win at the basket. I just feel like that team needs one more guy. And I know Julius Randle probably could have been that one more guy at one point, but he hasn't been that one more guy, which is why he just got traded for a second round pick. The Timberwolves elected to say, hey, we'll take cap space over keeping Julius Randle. And I think if they could get off the money of Rudy Gobert, that would help them too. But I can't think of a cap oriented move they could make in free agency that saves them. In my personal opinion, right now, I can't think of any. So I think, personally speaking, I don't think the Timberwolves are good enough, and that's kind of been the problem with Milwaukee for years. Is that, hey, we have one of the best players in Giannis, and then once upon a time, Chris Middleton, when he was healthy, was a great second option. Then you got Drew Holiday. You got all these great additional players that let Giannis be the guy of the team, which is why the Spurs don't need to be so gung ho to add more talent like Jaylen Brown. You just let Wemby be the guy. Just let him lead the team. And I understand against the Knicks he got shut down, but that he'll learn with time. He's in his third year of his career. When he becomes a vet in the next 3 years and he's on his next extension and he's making his big money and he's the guy of the team like he is now, that's just not going to be the long-term story. And with the Bucks, that's never been the long-term story. For an example, when Giannis became the guy, Giannis was the guy. It didn't matter when we added Damian Lillard. It didn't matter when we had Drew Holiday. It didn't matter when we had these guys. It was still Giannis's team. It was still, hey, put the ball in his hands and let him go to work. He is one of the best players in the world. And that's why teams like the Spurs just don't need it. That's why his team like the Spurs didn't need Giannis to begin with. The Heat needed a Giannis. I'd argue the Celtics didn't need a Giannis either. The Heat needed a guy who can just put the ball in his hands and go to work. Take some pressure off Bam. Take some pressure off additional players who can be great contributors. When I know Bam put up 83 points this year against the Wizards, but Bam had to force a lot of shots to make that happen. He had to shoot a shit ton of free throws to make that happen. This isn't, oh, hey, Bam is this best player in the NBA type story. This is, Bam is a great player, and if you give him a player who can be the go-to, and Bam could be a good in addition, because Bam does so much. He's such a good defender. He's a good enough shooter. You give him a guy who can let him floor space and not always be pressured. He will be good and useful, and that's what worked with Giannis his entire career. When we won the championship, Brook Lopez knew his role. He defended the paint. He shot threes. That's what Miles Turner was supposed to do. Chris Middleton, great ISO scorer, took pressure off Giannis, let someone else put the balls in his hand to try to score, so Giannis didn't need to always have the ball in his hands. Giannis could take those little breaks here and there, so he wasn't always super fatigued. You got Drew Holiday, a guy who was actually putting pressure and switching on defense. a guy who could score but didn't have to be a primary scorer. With Lillard, he had to try to be a primary scorer because you gave up that defensive switch ability for a guy who could score 20 to 25 points per game, who could your objective was to stop having Giannis have to get to the basket 24/7 and try to put more shooters around him. And you gave him one of the best shooters of all time in Damian Lillard. And quite frankly, yes, it was fun to watch. It was cool. It was a smart idea at the time, but age caught up, injuries caught up, and it just didn't work out. With the Miami Heat, you can't really assure. You have to assume that they have a contingency plan because Giannis makes $54 million or 57 or whatever. Bam makes 50 plus. Davion Mitchell's your starting point guard. He's not really a lights out shooter. So what other shooters does this team plan to have? They gave up the 13th pick. They gave up future picks. They gave up Tyler Hero, who objectively is a pretty damn good shooter. They gave up Jaime Jaquez, who not the most reliable shooter, but was a depth option. So they have to plan to bring guys who can shoot the ball well to the team, who can also play some good defense, because that's how you work around Bam and Giannis together. So overall, until we see what free agency looks like, I don't know how to judge entirely this Giannis Heat trade, but I still think the Bucks made the correct decision. They did well by Giannis. They traded him to a team in the East where he can stay competitive for the most part. And overall wise, the Bucks are going to be a better team for this move. John Horst, I think, did the right thing. Jimmy Haslam made it clear: extend Giannis before the draft or trade him. And supposedly, yesterday was the deadline for the Heat. It was okay, take our offer or we're pivoting. The Bucks took the offer. The Bucks said, Celtics won't give us more picks. It's not worth the 1-for-1. We're gonna do this deal with Miami, and I think it was the best. Trade done. Conclusion made. I've talked about this for an hour. I'm tired. What time is it? 2:30. Oh, probably gotta get back to work in like 5 minutes. All right, I got 5 minutes. Any other points to make here? No. At some point, we're gonna do a Bucks rebuild, but I don't see the point in doing it now. The Bucks rebuild would be more fun to do next year, when we actually know who the Bucks are gonna draft with 10 and 13. When we actually know if the Bucks are gonna pivot any of the players they got from the Bucks trade, from the Miami Heat trade, to try to acquire more assets or take on some other contracts or whatever. So once we see what the entire trade piece by piece looks like, then we'll come back at it. I do Milwaukee Bucks rebuilds every year. I'm probably gonna do it again next year. I did an every eras video for the Bucks this year, and obviously I rebuilt around Giannis because he's my favorite player of all time. But when we do the past eras next year in 2K, I'll probably do a Giannis Bucks franchise again for one of the past eras. But when we do the modern era, we're gonna be doing a freakless Bucks rebuild, and that should be fun. That should be a good time. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's my conclusion. Um,